Kaldheim spoiler season has barely started, and already we are seeing some big swings in the Magic finance market. Greetings, owners of fine luxury cardboard rectangles. We have an interesting video today that's fairly similar to a lot of the videos I make around spoiler time, where we're going to talk about a brand new card that's coming out from Kaldheim and some older cards that are connected to it. But in this case, the connection is actually going to come through financial market movement as opposed to particular cards from Magic's history that kind of do the same thing as the card we're going to talk about, right? So it's a little bit different, but mostly the same. So let's start out with today's spoiler card, which is Magda Brazen Outlaw. And I have to admit, I really like the concept of this card. It's a lot of fun. So we're going to obviously be using the beautiful showcase framed version of Magda because I can't help myself. I absolutely love these Kaldheim frames. They're gorgeous with the pillars and the little dragon situated at the top. Man, it feels so good. This feels like some fun high fantasy. And like the wooden plank part of the text box, there's just all these little details that the more I look at the cards, the more I pick up on the different stylistic elements and the more I adore them. But let's talk about the card itself. So Magda is 1 red and 1 for a 2/1 Dwarf Berserker, and I think this is cool for a couple of different reasons. First of all, we don't have a ton of dwarves in Magic, and we don't have a ton of Berserkers, but they're both things that easily fit into Magic, and especially with dwarves. Looking back on it and thinking about it, we really have had like a small amount of dwarves compared to things like elves and goblins, which roughly have probably about 10 times the amount of design space used up, right? Where goblins and elves are everywhere. Dwarves and orcs as well are the kinds of races that have had to take a step back and be like, when's our turn coming? When's our turn coming? Wow! Kaldheim is the turn for the dwarves. And actually thinking about it, dwarves, treasure, gold, all that goodness ties into the concept of the video. So this works on so many different levels. So Magda is a brazen outlaw, which means a criminal who isn't really trying to hide what they do or does very like daring kinds of raids. Either way, that's the coolest kind of outlaw. They're also admittedly usually the most short-lived ones, because if you make yourself into a big problem for the local law officials and things like that, bad things are going to happen to you, right? Usually. Although we're talking about a world with magic, and we're talking about someone who can basically bring dragons into their service. So Magda has some leg up in that regard. All right, so what does Magda do? First of all, Magda gives all other dwarves you control +1/+0, which is really nice because dwarven lords are hard to come by. There are not a lot of cards that give plus bonuses to dwarves on top of being a sturdy little 2-cost body on a 2/1, right? So, I mean, obviously the ability doesn't apply to Magda, but just Magda's presence makes the other dwarves, we can do this, which is cool. And whenever a dwarf you control becomes tapped, create a treasure token. So Magda just knows how to make dwarves rich, and that's going to make dwarves love you, right? Because traditionally, dwarves are similar to dragons in that dwarves love treasure. Like, dwarves love treasure, but most of the time will go in a more lawful way to acquire it. You know what I mean? They'll spend their time mining up the ore deep from in the earth, whereas a dragon will go and just take what it wants because of how big and powerful it is. And Magda kind of combines that concept together, where it's like, I'm a dwarf, but instead of laboring in the earth to draw the treasure out, instead, I'm just going to take my treasure from elsewhere. And you can see how that would appeal to some dwarves, or maybe all of the dwarves. Maybe the idea of the dwarves getting +1/+0 is because secretly inside, they wish they could all be like dragons and didn't have to labor under the earth, digging out all this gold and silver, melting it down, refining it, just being able to just go and take what you want. Maybe that's what fills the dwarves with like this sort of, she's living the life I want to live. I want to be Magda. I'm inspired. Or it could be something else. We don't have the full background story. Now, on top of every time a dwarf you control becoming tapped, which is going to make the dwarves love you, it's also sacrifice 5 treasures, search your library for an artifact or dragon card, put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So this brazen outlawishness, whatever, I'm sure there's a better word for that. Anyways, this blatant breaking of the law to gather up treasure. That treasure is used to bring dragons into your service or to buy really powerful magical objects, the artifacts. That feels really cool. The way that the card builds up to something. Like it starts out by leading your dwarfs. I'll give you all +1. Let's charge in. And when they charge in, you're gaining up treasure. So maybe basically Mag's just like, yo, you're all outlaws now. I'm going to send you in there. And when you go in, start swinging with your axe, while you're there, fill your pockets up, bro. Fill your pockets with stuff, bring it back. Like, is Magda basically leading all the dwarves down the path of snatch and grab, right? So we've got this card, which is a really solid card. This card is going to have an impact on Commander, right? It's pretty obvious this is going to be a sought-after Commander card. And the price spikes, the cards we're going to talk about, specifically tie into Magda and most likely Commander. I mean, other decks, somebody could just want to build like a regular Magda deck. That's totally possible. But the cards that we're talking about that spiked are like older, like way older cards. We're talking old frame cards. So to me, this all smacks of Commander. And let's be real, Commander has had an outsized influence on Magic this year. When you take into account the fact that Wizards has said they're specifically pushing Commander harder, and then the fact that the overall global situation has made it so that people can't really go out and play in competitive Standard and Modern, right? We've seen slowly but surely all of competitive play that's officially sanctioned be shut down almost globally, right? So we've got a scenario where Commander's influence is going to be the most strongly felt because it's the most casual and people can still get together for some games of Commander here or there. People are playing it online. Commander is the most casual format, and that gives it the most resiliency when situations like our current world crop up. So let's dive into the craziest price spikes, which is what I want to talk about. And they're old, funky cards you may have never seen before. So the first one we're going to talk about is Dwarven Bloodboiler, an overlooked absolute janky rare from Magic's past. 3 red for a 2/2 dwarf. You tap an untapped dwarf you control. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. And the flavor text says, his battle cry unleashes an avalanche of dwarves. Pretty straightforward, right? This is a pretty simple concept for a Lord, and you can see why this is a card you're probably not familiar with up until now, because it's fairly underwhelming. Magic, like I said before, only has a handful of dwarves. So this card for the longest time was like, okay, what's the old school plan with this? Basically, get a dwarf. There's a bunch of different dwarves that have abilities that say like, target creature with power 2 or less you control can't be blocked. So make one of your dwarves unblockable like he's tunneling under, and then have the Dwarven Bloodboiler tap your other dwarves to like boost them up, right? Like, I mean, and this is 3 red. You have to pay 3 red for this. If they made this guy nowadays, I feel like his casting cost would be like a red and 2, and he would be a 3/2. Because this is really, really underwhelming. So up until Magda got like showcased, here's Magda, it's coming. Dwarven Bloodboiler for eternity has been a 50-cent find it in the bulk bin rare, like a who even cares rare, right? Now it has almost, it's basically almost multiplied its price by like 20. So it went from being a 50-cent card to a $9 card. That's 18 times the price, right? Which is a massive spike for a admittedly piece of garbage card normally. But when you look at what you can do with Magda, all of a sudden, wait a minute. Now I can tap my dwarves without actually having to send them into battle. And you can just send one dwarf in. It could even just be Magda. Send Magda in brazenly. Get him, Magda! You swing with Magda. And then if they block, you just tap enough dwarves to destroy the blocker. If they don't block, then you tap a bunch of dwarves and swing through for a bunch of damage, while at the same time, every dwarf you're tapping, you're getting a treasure token for. So it's got fantastic synergy with Magda, right? The other card that's seen a huge spike is an uncommon from the same time frame. They both come from the way long ago, back when dwarves got a little bit of tribal action. And this is Dwarven Recruiter, right? So 1 red and 2 for a 2/2 dwarf. They don't have, these probably have been errated to have professions as well now, right? So they're probably like dwarf warriors or whatever. Who knows? Maybe they've been given berserker creature type. I don't 100% know. But 1 red and 2 for a 2/2 dwarf. When Dwarven Recruiter comes into play, search your library for any number of dwarf cards and reveal those cards. Shuffle your library, then put them on top of it in any order. This is essentially a dwarf variation of Goblin Recruiter. The crazy thing is Goblin Recruiter is only 2 mana. This guy's 3. Yeah, he's a 2/2. Goblin Recruiter is a 1/1, but this is a hefty casting cost for a card that really, up until now, completely didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, you're paying 3 mana to go through your deck for any number of dwarves, but there's so few dwarves, who even cares? But now, all of a sudden, dwarves have a proper EDH possibility with Magda. So previously overlooked cards are like, yo, okay, wait, I can go through my deck and stack it however I want. Honestly, Goblin Recruiter ended up getting banned. It's not banned in Commander, but it got banned in competitive play because essentially what you could do is you could just stack a ton of goblins on your deck and then just use something like Goblin Charbelcher or some nonsense to be like, oh, look, all these cards, I haven't hit a land yet. I guess you're done for. You know what I mean? So it wasn't, Goblin Recruiter wasn't used specifically really to recruit goblins. It was used as a combo piece. And since Dwarven Recruiter couldn't come anywhere close to competing with that, the only thing it could be used for in the past really would be as a weak version combo piece you wouldn't even want to use. So it languished, but not completely to the same degree. Funnily enough, this card has been worth $1 for like forever. And you can understand why. If you are somebody who likes playing dwarves, this guy is going to line things up for you properly. I mean, you can literally stagger as many different card draws as you want and make sure you're going to get all the dwarves that you want. So there definitely is appeal there when it comes to dwarf players. One of the things that really stood out to me about this card is the artwork. I mean, first of all, the first thing I always noticed is the dwarf in the front has such an interesting looking weapon, right? It looks like a crazily modified warhammer being held upside down. Like, take a look at what's at the base of it. That looks like the top of a maul. And then the part that's up in the air kind of looks like a shovel with the tip broken off. But it's really like, this is a combination of warhammer and axe. And it's actually a really interesting looking weapon with like a dwarf's stout strength. It feels like something you could cleave through people fairly easily with. So that was the first thing I noticed about the art. And the second thing I noticed about the art was like, wait a minute. Everybody looks exactly the same. Like, they all look like the same dwarf. This looks like a clone army of dwarfs. Like, look at it. You've got the commander in the front with like the red hood and the red robes, and everybody behind him has kind of a muted tone, but they all literally have the like pretty much like identical features. When we've seen other cards with dwarves, there's some level of variety to them. These dwarves are too homogenous in terms of, it makes them feel like they're not real. Do you know what I mean? When everybody looks virtually the same, it just feels like this might have originally, like, was this artwork meant to be some kind of like blue copying spell or something else where you copy a ton of something? I don't know, man. That's just my particular vibe that I get from it. Either way, I felt like talking about that. So this card actually spiked from $1 all the way up to $8. So if you have any of this dwarf stuff kicking around, especially Bloodboilers, then you're looking at a nice little bit of extra trade bonus. I have no idea. One thing I don't know is how firm these prices become afterwards. Sure, Bloodboiler spiked up, but what happens when the new shiny toy comes along and people turn away and don't really care about playing the dwarf decks anymore? So I don't know how sustainable it is. But Magda is a card that I had already wanted to talk about for multiple reasons. It's really cool as a flavor concept. The artwork is awesome. The card itself is great. And then I found out about these price spikes and I'm like, oh, sweet. We're going to do a slightly different variation of video today where we tie that in as well. If it's of interest, I don't know. And you know what? Trying different things here. So let me know what you think in the comments below about all of this. Are you a fan of Magda and the dwarf concept? Do you not really care? Are you expecting a bunch more dwarf stuff? Because I am. I'm looking forward to seeing what else is coming down the pike. Other than that, really, I've got a brand new lore video over on Fantasy Geographic that you can check out. I got a silly, goofy video over on my Hatcher channel where we're having fun, and a new one's going to come out there in the next couple days as well. So I'll link videos up on the screen for you to check out if you so desire. If you like what I'm doing here, like, comment, subscribe, because YouTube loves all that goodness. Share the video around to people because that's great for the channel. And yeah, other than that, thanks for coming by, my friends, and I'll see you tomorrow where we might be revealing all the stuff I got sent by an actual magic artist yesterday in the mail. Goodbye for now.